got a lot of drive. We've got a lot of really clever tech happening on the all-wheel drive system. But you've also got a brilliant chassis.
Jeez, it pulls, doesn't it? The only good thing about having a croaky throat is you get the sexy voice. But rather than watch me waffle on for the intro, let's hear from the car's owner.
Yeah, hi Stu, my name's Peter. This is my R35. It's a 2016 model. Back in 2016 I was looking to buy one. I thought there was no better bang for buck than the R35. I have a pretty long history with Skyline GTRs. Interestingly, this was advertised in Brisbane and the chap said 3,000 Ks, nothing wrong with the car. I'm 64, it's too fast for me. So I rang him up, talked to him about it and said, well, I'm 67, sounds just right for me. So sent my mechanic up there, checked it over and then brought it back for me to Sydney. So I've knocked up about 8,000 Ks, still only done 11,000, but I actually think that they're still very good value for money. I think the R36, which is probably coming not too far in the distant future, will be very expensive, which will again make these look like performance bargains, even at their present elevated prices. I love it because it's not only its performance, it's just everything about it. I've had a long history with Japan. It reminds me of the Japanese character, the attention to detail, the precision. I wouldn't call it quirkiness, but there's just little features that are not shared by any other supercars or fast cars that to me make it typically Japanese. People comment about the clunky gearbox, this and that, but to me they're not criticisms, they're features of the car. It doesn't detract from the performance. Just a fantastic all-round car and no better bang for buck than this.
Hey mate, we got our Darth Vader look on today. That's Star Wars.
Yeah, well, it matches the number plates and the sticker on the back, doesn't it, Stu? So.
Yeah. Little known fact about Mark and me. Mark?
I am your father.
I know you're pretty old, Stu, but you're not that old, right?
Yeah. No disservice to your dad, sorry.
We're on a mission today. What are we going to do? Blow up the planet Alderaan or? No, we're road testing a Nissan GTR. It's not a Skyline, because they dropped the Skyline name. It's not a Bluebird, it's not a Skyline, it's an R35 Nissan GTR. Or to our American friends, Q Mark, or as our American friends would say, it's a...
I don't know. We'll have to do that again.
R35 GTR, or as our American friends would say...
Nissan.
Is that right?
I don't know why, but that's what it is. So, I know we do have a lot of subscribers from the US and I have a lot of friends in the US.
Why can't you say it properly? It's Nissan.
It's a Nissan. So they know what we're talking about.
Watashi wa sukoshi nihongo ga hanasemasu. Nissan desu, okay?
Perfect.
Nissan desu.
We're all clear.
Okay, we sorted that out. Carlos Ghosn, who's a guy who's really in a large part responsible for this car. We'll come back to him. Very interesting character.
It certainly is.
But he was responsible in part for this car. Yeah. But even more were the famous Japanese engineers. And here's a whole list of them up here. This guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. Mr. GTR up the top here. And luckily Carlos gave him free rein to go, you got 6 years, guys. Go crazy. Build me the ultimate successor to the R34.
Yeah.
This is actually far less intimidating than I thought. I thought it was going to be really dark and enclosed in here. From outside, the windows look like tiny little slots, but the vision's actually not too bad. Tram lines a little bit.
It does. Tram lines a little bit. You know, in some ways, the steering, it's a little bit light in my view.
Is it really? Okay.
Just like a little bit more weight on it, just a little bit over boosted.
They started with about 353 kilowatts when it first came out in 2007 and gradually up to 370, 390, 406. This one's got 414 kilowatts, 570 something horsepower. So
that's
huge.
A lot, right?
Oh, well, it's a good thing it's a nice dry road for us. Oh, whoops.
There you go.
This was so novel when it came out, the fact that you could tweak your dash. So you got all these different screens you can have. So here we go, coolant's fine, and standard one we might go with, boost gauge. So what's the drive like?
That's good. We've just got pretty much all the comfort settings at the moment. A little bit of it's a little wandery over the bumps. You'd expect a bit of that. I mean, it's a serious sports car, even though we're in the softer modes on everything. It's a fair bit of road noise there.
Yeah.
You can feel it's very darty, isn't it, for a big car?
Yeah.
And it does tramline a little bit.
They're very quiet standard. Now this one's got a cob exhaust on it. That's it. That's the only modification to make it a bit noisier. But even so, that exhaust has got a lot to compete with the tyres. The tyres are really, really loud.
Yeah, and you do get quite a bit of mechanical noise as well, don't you? There's a lot going on with this car, isn't there? It really is.
I'm actually surprised how noisy it is. I heard the exhaust then.
Yeah.
It's a real trumpet blare sound, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
And it just wants to go, doesn't it? Like that was almost no throttle, and it just the car's a real jet.
You know what it's reminding me of? My all-wheel drive turbo in the power delivery.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
That's what they benchmarked this car against, the 997 turbo. They took them both to the Nürburgring side by side when they were testing it a couple of years before they released it. This car did a 738 round Nürburgring, which is very good on a damp track, and it was faster than a 997 turbo. So
right.
that tells you a lot about how quick it was.
It does, doesn't it?
It's actually my first time in one of these.
Is it really?
I normally only see them in rallies as they come past us.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
But not for you. You were involved with the testing or the launch or something?
I just did fairly recently. I was just back in 2021, one of the I think the last versions of this, the Nismo version of the GTR.
Oh yeah.
R35, carbon ceramic brakes. Spent a day driving that, taking media for runs around one of the circuits here in Sydney. So yeah, it was fun. An awesome car. Heavy on a track, you really do feel it. I think the natural sort of habitat of this car is a really, is a windy road, as you say, Targa rallies, the sort of things that you've competed in regularly. Perfect for those sorts of events.
When they first came out in Targa rallies, I first saw them in 2009 in Targa Tasmania, and they had lots of teething troubles with going into limp mode and transmissions, and they're not a car that likes to be messed with. A lot of people tried early on to crank them up and blew up the motors. As leave the motors standard, fantastic. Try and get more boost out of them, like 30 pound. No, they don't like that.
I think like a lot of things, Stu, you've just got to learn how to drive a very good car better. So much of the time is in the driver. Why try and get more boost, more this, more that? Just learn how to drive the damn thing properly.
Yep.
Get a driver coach.
Yep.
People, learn how to drive properly.
I took the shocks back out of comfort mode and put them in sporty mode. Jeez.
It does. Actually, the comparison you made with your Porsche Turbo 996.
Yeah.
It's actually really similar, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm not driving it, but it does.
Just that pull out of those slow corners.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the big attribute of this car, isn't it? Is its traction.
I'm going to listen to the noise a little bit. Windows going down.
The gear shift's really quick. Dual clutch. See there, you push in a little bit too quick. There's no understeer, is it? I mean, it really just off the throttle. The chassis is superb. We know we've got a lot of drive. We've got a lot of really clever tech happening on the all-wheel drive system. But you've also got a brilliant chassis.
Jeez, it pulls, doesn't it? Wow. That Coles van's keeping up with us though, so he's doing a good job.
Yeah.
Well done, Coles delivery guy. He's right behind us.
So yeah, look, it's everything you expect, isn't it? This car just does everything so well. My experience, as I mentioned, of driving them on the track, like they're good on the track, but the race versions of these are always two-wheel drive. An all-wheel drive version, there's just so much weight, there's so much going on, and in some cases on a track it slows you down, unless it's wet, of course.
Yeah.
But on a windy mountain road like we're on a Targa event,
Yeah.
Just outstanding.
I can see why in our little RX-8 rear-wheel drive turbo car we actually struggle to keep up with it.
Yeah.
Brilliant work, Japanese engineers.
Yeah, they're really outstanding, aren't they?
Yeah.
But you can feel that just the sheer corner grip there.
Yeah. Not the smoothest implementation of stability control there.
Little bit of stability control.
A little bit of, but you could feel the weight moving. You know, when they made this car, they said, we're not going to worry about the weight. It is what it is, but it'll have so much power, it'll overcome that, and that weight will give it the grip we want on a wet road.
Well, I've just bumped the stability and traction control up a little bit there, and let's just sort of see how that goes, because it is a little bit of a limiting factor there. Certainly in that regular road driving mode, it does cut in very, very quickly. Well, that's certainly better, isn't it?
Yeah, 7,000's the red line, but maximum power is at about 6.6. So
Yeah.
and the torque range goes from 3.5 to 5.5. So it really big boost from quite down low.
Yeah. So 15k advisory sign there, Stu. But let's just see what corner speed we can get out of it. That's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah, so we're in sports on everything there. We've gone right up on the traction and stability control. So I mean, it's just not cutting in at all.
Very nice seats too, very comfy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's happier now. It's just like last time when you drove. Softened up the tyres a little bit, took the hard edges off them.
Yeah.
They got a bit of warmth in them, and they actually got quieter.
Yeah. Certainly having bumped that traction control up, that's
Yes.
way better, isn't it?
Rather than hesitating and going, waiting to get it straight,
I actually lifted.
you did it on the throttle.
I
Just
did
by,
that one myself, which I'd prefer to do. I'd rather.
I know.
It intervenes a little bit too low when it's just in that comfort mode.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a much safer way of driving it, but
It meant you didn't have to turn the steering wheel so much. You just used the throttle pedal to turn the car around.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a nice little blast. Very safe too, Mark. Well done. Look, the history of Skylines, GTRs if you like, they've come in eras. The first era was from like 1969 to 1974, and that addresses the other car that Peter has, the Hakusuka, which I hope we review. That's an amazing car. So we had the RB30, the RB31, then there was a gap, and then in 1989 we got the R32, 33 and 34 that took them right through from 89 right through to 2002, by which time Carlos Ghosn had come into Nissan and was getting involved, and he played a significant role in it happening. And we got the R35. This is the next era. This car got phased out a year or so ago, and then they brought it back again. There was a bit of a lull. And have you seen the revised styling for this car, the latest R35 for 2024?
Yeah.
Looks beautiful. So who actually knows what the R36 GTR is going to look like, or when it's coming, or even what the powertrain will be? Probably some kind of EV hybrid alongside their trusty V6. So keeping the weight down is going to be a real struggle. All we do know is that the 2024 R35 is clearly Nissan thinking, don't mess too much with the proven formula. Subtle styling changes I think really help the front end, but very little different from the current model, and still very much the same car that was released, if you can believe it, more than 15 years ago. The father of the GTR, Katsutoshi Mitsuno, is clearly thinking, Kuwarete inai bai wa shusai shinai de kudasai. If you're watching Mizuno-san, tell me if I'm wrong. Check the view out.
Look at that.
Wouldn't that be a lovely place to put a Formula One circuit
Wouldn't
or
that be
something?
a great place to have a Formula One track, Stu?
Yeah.
If only someone come up with an idea of putting a Formula One track
Right there on that government-owned land.
Yeah, well, it's an old quarry there, and you've got water
and a new
views
airport just 15 k's down the road.
Yeah, but no, they'd rather go to Melbourne again. They figure.
Don't tell anyone about that.
No, we'll keep that quiet.
Yeah, there's a lot of play in those. It's a dual clutch, but there's a lot of slip in those clutches, isn't there? Yeah, very capable. I can see how it'd be hard on tyres though, the way that was working there.
Absolutely.
What a super collectible car too. He's smart, Peter, isn't he? He buys the right cars at the right time.
Yeah.
I said to him, whatever you're going to buy, I'm going to buy, except for one thing.
Yeah.
I'm what you call a 100-aire. There are thousandaires and millionaires, and I'm a 100-aire. They christened the original R32 Godzilla. The Australian press gave it that name.
And, you know, we've tested the R32, haven't we, Stu, which is, in some ways, is my preference of car simply because of the lineage and the racing history of that car, particularly in Australia. If you haven't had a look at that video, it's a pretty cool video, and check it out. But
Oi! You! Bugger off!
this is a few evolutions again in absolutely every aspect. And
It's a significantly bigger feeling car, isn't it?
it is, yeah.
I mean, it's got a very sizable boot. Back seat is, guess what? It's even less practical. The seat squabs are really long, but there's no leg room.
Yeah.
So if you've got a really long bottom but no legs, it'll probably suit you really well. Okay, steering feels a little bit light. Brake feel?
Yeah, good. The brakes has probably a little bit of a, I won't say deadish feel, but it doesn't feel, I mean, it stops brilliantly, but it doesn't give you a lot of feedback. And I could probably say the same about the steering. Like, it does everything right, but if you're just looking purely at feel.
This car's very trackable, isn't it? Just, the seats are good.
You know, we're doing 49 k's an hour, it's in 5th gear. Unlike a Ferrari though, when you're driving it in auto and it's in 5th or 6th gear at this speed, it's just awful. Really, you have to drive those on the paddles all the time.
You literally are in 5th gear at 45 k's an hour.
Yeah.
Bose stereo. The drag coefficient they aimed for was 0.28. For a car with this frontal area, it's incredibly good.
Yeah.
And they had to really work to do that. And they actually got it down to 0.27 by working on the underbody. They realised the underbody was just as important as on top. Yeah. They managed to achieve that 0.27 with downforce at the front and back at the same time. Much better than it looks aerodynamically. Mm-hmm. I've got way too used to 600 horsepower cars in the way they pull. But what is most impressive about this car has to be the traction out of corners.
It's outstanding, isn't it?
For a car this big. Yeah, okay. They only sold 1,000 of these cars in the Australia-New Zealand market in total so far. 15,000 in Japan. So, is it too late to get one of these as an investment car? I suggest not. They're sufficiently old now that they're not the flavour of the month anymore, but they're not old enough that people have said, oh, they're a really rare classic and hard to find a good one. I know they've got a reputation for high maintenance and expensive maintenance. It's probably justified, but there's quite a few of the early cars for sale, and by quite a few I mean 15. Early cars I mean up to 2010. That's where the bulk of them were sold initially. Still half the price of a Porsche Turbo equivalent when new. $100,000 seems to be the entry-level price for a decent one. You can get them a little bit cheaper. I'd suggest that's actually quite a good investment.
Yeah.
If it's a good car, and you would need to get it checked by someone who knew. Later cars, though, far more expensive. This is a 2016 car, and there were significant improvements right across the range. It's got incredibly low Ks. It's now only got 11,000 Ks. Yeah. By the end of today, it might have 12.
This is a bit of a unicorn, this car, isn't it, I think?
Oh, it's really
like a lot of Peter's cars.
So this car is worth $250,000.
Yeah.
But it's making the earlier ones actually look like quite good value. I think if you could find one for $100,000, I know it sounds laughable to talk like that, but good value if you can verify its history, its service history. Certainly you won't be disappointed with the performance, and if you were to compare it to the 997 Turbo at the time, maybe not quite the 991 Turbo, which is again significantly faster than the 997, but certainly this car is the equal to a Porsche 997 Turbo, and they're $250,000 cars as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, an investment. Later model cars though, there's only a couple of them telephone number prices, you know.
Yeah.
Off the mark, unless you do launch control, it's not super brisk, but once it gets going, boom, you're off.
Once you're just into the engine, we know the engine's brilliant. It just is outstanding.
It is.
compared to a current PDK Porsche transmission, night and day. Even the current Ferrari transmission's significantly better. Like, it does the job, it's just that actuation of clutch is a little clunky.
I mentioned Carlos Ghosn. I want to talk about him briefly. What can we say about Carlos Ghosn, a driving force behind the R35? The guy was a corporate megastar, and he knew it. CEO at Michelin North America, then he joined Renault and made them billions as le cost cutter by closing plants, launching new models, reducing the workforce. Then he convinced Renault to buy a $5 billion stake in Nissan, 37% of the company, which was losing about that much every year, had huge debt and was making pretty boring cars, apart from the R34 GTR, of course. At the time they said he'd be better off putting that $5 billion on a barge, setting fire to it and sinking it in the middle of the harbour. But, always good at spending other people's money, he convinced Renault and eventually became CEO and/or chairman of both Nissan and Renault, and later on refused the CEO job at Ford if he couldn't be chairman as well, which didn't go down well with Jim Ford Jr. But he turned Nissan around, out with the boring, in with the exciting, but with a lot of staff casualties along the way, as you'd expect. He pushed hard to get the R35 GTR and he got his way. He was also a strong advocate for EVs and the Nissan Leaf, saying the world had no alternative but to build zero-emission cars. Remember that even in 2017, when he stood down, Nissan was still selling twice as many EVs as Tesla. So give him credit, he's a smart bastard. Spoke Portuguese, English, French, Arabic and a little bit of Japanese. As a person, he was a charismatic megastar, living the high life, bending rules, spending big, on the company's expense account of course, houses in Paris, New York, Beirut, Rio, but at the same time making smart decisions and making lots of money for both Renault and Nissan, even though at times they each suspected he was favouring the other. For a while, the Japanese loved him too, even creating manga comics to celebrate his business smarts. In Japan, if you're working for the good of the company, you're a good guy. In France, he was le cost cutter. In Japan, he was Mr. 7-Eleven, because those were the hours he worked. A few indiscretions could be tolerated. But in a jobs-for-life country like Japan, having a foreigner barge in at the very top, sack thousands of people, take a salary 10 times that the head of Toyota, that always rubbed some people the wrong way. And some were just waiting for their moment of samurai revenge. So when he was found to be cooking the books, misusing company assets, it all went sour. Carlos thought he was untouchable, but suddenly found himself in a very uncomfortable Japanese jail on fraud charges, and off the boards of Nissan and Renault in no time. Hero to zero, with $1 billion, about $9 million bail. No problem, he was soon out on house arrest. The rest of the story is pure James Bond. Covert trip to Osaka on the bullet train, then hidden in a musical instrument case, escaped through Japanese customs without detection on a chartered private jet to Turkey and then onto his house in Beirut. Nya 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 nya. And that's where he is today. You'd think that after all that you'd keep a low profile. But no, Carlos is on TV shows, writing books, special guest speaker, but on the Interpol wanted list, so he'll probably never leave Lebanon. So thank you, Carlos Ghosn, for the R35 GTR. There are a lot of people who still love you, but there are a lot who also think that you've got a lot of teeth for such a smart and they'd love to get their hands on you. Maintenance costs are going to be up there, fuel costs are going to be up there a little bit, but look, we're cruising along at incredibly 5.9. Okay, Mark, final assessment. However capable you think it is, it's more.
It's more capable than most drivers will ever be, there's no doubt about that. You need a special bit of road to be able to exploit the car.
Yeah.
It's just so good at everything it does. I think it's the mechanical side of this car that is just so strong. The engine, the transmission, the all-wheel drive system that the vehicle has, it's just incredible, and it's so potent. And with the settings, when you bump that up a bit and you've got it into the higher settings, traction control, stability control is really doesn't intervene unless you've really kind of stuffed up. Fun car to drive, there's no doubt about it.
There's nothing I can say about the R35 GTR that hasn't already been said. Look at all these accolades. Porsche turbo matching performance at base model Carrera price. In terms of supercar bang for your buck, I don't think it can be beaten. Particularly the early ones, if you can find one that hasn't been flogged, which could be hard. Importantly, not only is it mega fast, it's safe. However much grip you think you have, it's got more. Yes, you can certainly feel all those 1800 kilos, but those clever Japanese engineers have said, we don't care. Watashi no biru grasso or moto kudasai. Hang on and watch this. They're just showing off. Not a Skyline, not a Bluebird, just GTR. Very trustworthy car.
Yeah, trustworthy is a really good description. It just does everything right. It's no nasty habits at all. Having said that, every car has a limit. The limit on this car is really high. If you did throw this off the road, you would be going really fast and you will be on your way to having a huge car crash.
Yes.
You need to not extend beyond what the driver can do.
But for all this puff, surely there's got to be something wrong with it. And if there is a criticism of the Nissan GTR, it's this. For all its immense capability, I and Mark felt there was a slight level of disconnection with all those computers sitting between the road, the tyres, and you, the driver. Yes, even if you're just a moderately capable driver, on the track you'll probably slay every other road car. And on your favourite twisty bends, none of your buddies will be able to keep up. But it's all just a little bit clinical. That trumpet blare isn't the same music as the motor behind you in a GT3 or a mid-engine Ferrari, and the steering doesn't talk to you like it does in a modern 911. For all its jaw-dropping capability, maybe the level of driver involvement isn't quite there. But it's still an astoundingly good car, and great value for money. Go and buy one. So there's our score, and it's done very, very well. I haven't added it up, but if it's not 20, it'll be bloody close to 20.
Yeah.
20 is our benchmark number for a really, really, really good car. Our scoring thing is a very subjective thing,
Yeah, of course.
so take it with a grain of salt. That's it for today. Thanks for watching inCARnation. We'll keep the special cars rolling, and it hardly gets more special than this. What do you reckon?
Absolutely, Stu, and thanks to Peter again for letting us use his absolutely pristine R35. It has to be one of the best in the country, doesn't it? I would have thought.
And thanks for doing the intro. It's much better than us doing it.
Yeah.
You rock.
Well done, Peter. You've got a job.
Oh hey, you made it right through to the end of the video. Congratulations. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, please share it with your motoring friends. And above all, click the little subscribe thing down here so you can see the latest videos when we bring them out, hopefully each week. I look forward to seeing you soon.